the lights on for the Tyler Bright and Early podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Bright, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football centered. And it's about that time. We got a lot to talk about here today, a lot to go over. But guess what? By the time you're watching this, it's going to be Saturday morning, bright and early. And you want to know why you're watching this content? Because you've been locked in. You've been following us on all of our social media platforms, whether that's TikTok, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, because I like calling it Twitter. Or you'd be watching the reels on TikTok, whatever it may be. You'd be listening on Spotify, or you're watching us here on YouTube. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. College football is here. Kind of a sneak peek of what we're going to be talking about here today. We're going to go over the entire SEC win total. It's going to be a little bit quicker here today, but we'll go over them. And then we'll also preview the game in Ireland between Kansas State and Iowa State, and maybe even talk about some other games going on if we have time. It's going to be more rapid fire for those games happening on Saturday. But then also, let's talk a bit about some conferences and what kind of song relates to them. You know, for example, we'll touch on it a little bit. You'll see what I'm talking about here. But without further ado, let's jump in to the SEC win totals. Starting off right off the bat with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Their win total is set at 9.5 wins. Kalen DeBoer, he's entering his second season at the helm of the Crimson Tide. And now, I think the Crimson Tide are going to have a really interesting season. You know, they didn't make the playoffs last season. A lot of people, you know, Alabama has high expectations. They were doing so well in the Nick Saban era. But he does have Grubb now as his offensive coordinator who he was familiar with from his time at Washington. And Nick Saban even tried to hire him as his OC in his final year. Didn't quite get him. But nonetheless, let's take a look at the schedule. Florida State, Louisiana Monroe, Wisconsin, at Georgia, Vanderbilt, at Missouri, Tennessee, at South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, Eastern Illinois, and at Auburn. And I do think at 9.5, that's a pretty respectable total. You can kind of go either way with this. I am going to take the over. Just because I think they're going to demolish Florida State on the road at Tallahassee. I think they'll get the win against Wisconsin. I think they'll probably lose to Georgia. But other than that, where's the loss on their schedule? I don't see it. I think they're going to be fairly improved. Ty Simpson, I think, is going to be a productive quarterback for them. And I just think you're going to see this offense take another step. And you're going to kind of see it kind of similar to what you saw at Washington and the offensive entourage that was there for the Huskies when DeBoer got that team rolling and they were, you know, NY6 bowl teams, or even like they did in his last season, making the national championship. So I'm going to take the over there and moving along. We got the Georgia Bulldogs. They are also set at 9.5 wins, and I'm easily taking the over there. Now, let's take a look at their schedule. Kirby Smart, probably, if not the best, tongue twister there. Can't tripping over my words. Kirby Smart, probably one of the best college football coaches right now in the current era. You know, if he's not the best, he's one of the best for sure. Take a look at the schedule. So they got Marshall, Austin Peay at Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky at Auburn, Ole Miss versus Florida at Mississippi State, Texas, Charlotte, and at Georgia Tech. And it's a pretty respectable schedule. And look out for that. Look out for that last game, the old-fashioned hate game, the rivalry game against the Yellow Jackets. The Yellow Jackets are going to be a lot improved this season, but are they going to be the top of the ACC? I don't know. My opinions might have changed from when I did the ACC predictions, but nonetheless, we locked those in, so we'll keep moving forward. But I'm taking the over because I think this Georgia team is going to go right back to where they were last season and make the playoff. I think they'll definitely finish at around 10-2 or 11-1, but they can't be shy against these games against Florida. You know, they almost lost to Florida last season. And then Ole Miss is always going to be a tough game too with Lane Kiffin as well. We'll kind of touch on the Rebels in a little bit, but I'm taking the over. I think they're a 10, 11, maybe even a 12-win team for sure in this conference. And now the last 9.5 win total, we got the Texas Longhorns. Oh, Georgia does face Texas too, so that could definitely be a 50-50 game as well that they could lose. But I don't imagine them losing more than 2 games. But I like Steve Sarkisian. I like what he's doing there. You know, this is Arch Manning finally taking the realms. How is he going to do in his first full season as a starter? It's going to be a tall task, but you can't ever doubt on a Manning. Mannings always do very, very well. And you know what, a 9.5 win total. Let's take a look at the schedule. So they start off right off the bat at Ohio State, San Jose State, San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston, at Florida, Oklahoma, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, at Georgia, Arkansas, and at Texas A&M. And I think at 9.5, I'm also going to take the over. I think this is another team. I think it's going to be, you're going to kind of see kind of a trend here in the SEC. I think they're going to have a bounce back year in the playoff, or at least in the playoff format. I think you're going to see a lot of contenders in the SEC, and you're going to see, a team. They only had Texas and in Georgia, if I'm correct. I'm already blanking on who made the playoff last season right now on the spot, but I'm pretty sure those were the main contenders. Everyone else was kind of on the bubble there, with South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama. They were kind of on the bubble, but they didn't get there. I think you're going to see a flip this year. I think you're going to see a very competitive SEC. But I'm taking the over with Texas. There's just so much talent on this team. I believe in the AP poll, they are the number one team. We'll kind of dissect the AP poll in the next episode or in the upcoming weeks. We'll kind of talk about the AP poll and whether I agree with some of the picks right there. But for this week, we got a lot on it, so we're going to leave it at that. So moving right along, after the Texas Longhorns, we go into the next win total, which is set at 8.5. You got the LSU Tigers, and this is a Tiger team. How is Nussmeier going to do this year? There's a lot of hype around Nussmeier. It kind of seems like I was higher on Nussmeier heading into last season. I know there wasn't much of that last season because of Jaden Daniels. He was the previous starter, but a lot of more people are hyped on Nussmeier, and I know he had a little bit of kind of an injury kind of question here or there. It was something with I'm not going to speculate, so I don't have it right up here right now on what his injury was, but we'll have to see if that's going to be a factor. Let's take a look at the schedule. So at Clemson, Louisiana Tech, Florida, Southeastern Louisiana, at Ole Miss, South Carolina, at Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, at Alabama, at Arkansas, or home against Arkansas, Western Kentucky, and at Oklahoma. And this LSU team, a lot of people saying that this is a hot year or a hot seat season for Brian Kelly. I don't think so. I think honestly the SEC, I don't think a lot of these, besides maybe like 2 or 3 teams, there's a lot of teams that have the potential to fire their coach because it is the SEC. It just means more, as they always say. But I don't think you're going to see that many head coaches fired at the end of the day. But definitely a few who are on the top of my mind. But so the win total, 8.5. And they have some tough games. It's going to depend their first game against Clemson, and then a couple other games thrown in there with at Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, and Ole Miss. Those are the games that are going to be pretty telling. I'm also going to take the over here for LSU, and I know we're kind of going, wow, there's a lot of overs right now in the SEC, but that's just I'm really high on them. I think the SEC is very, very top heavy this year and is going to have a lot of contenders, but that's what I got on LSU. Next up, the Ole Miss Rebels. They are at 8.5 as well. Lane Kiffin. I don't know what to make of this team. I don't really know what to make of this Ole Miss team. They had some ups and downs last season, but I just don't know what to make of this. They had the upset win against Georgia, but then they lost to Kentucky. So it's just kind of a weird mosh posh for Lane Kiffin and that squad. So they started off with Georgia State, at Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane, LSU, Washington State, at Georgia, at Oklahoma, South Carolina, the Citadel, Florida, and at Mississippi State. And I'm going to take the under here. I just think there's a lot of games where they can get got or upset. I definitely think they're losing on the road at Georgia. I can see them losing to South Carolina. I can see them losing to Florida. I can see them losing to Oklahoma, and I can see them losing to LSU. And I don't think it's going to happen, but they could lose to Kentucky. I mean, they did lose to Kentucky last season, so you can't throw that out of the realm of possibility. I'm not very high in Kentucky, but who knows? Who knows? It's a game that's on ABC, and I believe Austin Simmons is going to be the starting quarterback for Ole Miss. It's no Jackson Dart, but it's a step. It's a step. You're moving on, and how is that transition going to be? Only time will tell. Let's look at the next team that we got up here. We got the Tennessee Volunteers. So give me a second to click on them. Tennessee Volunteers, kind of in a lose-lose situation. I kind of talked about it with UCLA and Nico Iamaleava. Just a tough spot where it really felt like it was a lose-lose situation for both sides. Nico going to a less talented team, and Heupel losing a credible quarterback where we don't really know what to expect of this new starting quarterback who they just named, Aguilar, I believe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But I do respect what Heupel did. I do respect the decision that he made to stick to his guns and say, I'm not giving you that money. I respect it. I respect it. But look at their schedule. So they got Syracuse, East Tennessee State, Georgia, UAB, at Mississippi State, Arkansas, at Alabama, at Kentucky, Oklahoma, New Mexico State, at Florida, and Vanderbilt. And I'm taking the under as well. I think 8-4 is more likely than 9-3. And I just think, I think they'll beat Syracuse, but that could be a tough game, but I don't think Syracuse is as good as they were last season. And Georgia, that's going to be a tough game. At Alabama, tough game. Oklahoma could be a tough game, but I think they'll get the win. At Florida, who knows what that game is, but that game is interesting. It's November 22nd. So late in the season for this teams. Usually they played for, I think it was like the third Saturday in October or the third Saturday in September. They were so used to playing early on in the season. Now they're not doing that anymore. But nonetheless, that's what that Tennessee Volunteer team is looking like to me. I'm picking the under on them. Now we're at 7.5 wins. The next team that is up is the Auburn Tigers. Now, speaking of the Auburn Tigers, before we go into this, I have to talk about these claimed national championships that they had, especially the one that they claimed in 2004. Auburn. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Why are we living in the past? And I think it's so funny because there's so many teams, so many college teams that are just living in the past. But Auburn, you were literally not in the BCS national championship game. Or I don't know if the BCS, you weren't in the title game. It was USC and Oklahoma. Those were the two best teams at the time. You were very talented, but USC was better. You can make the argument that, maybe Auburn should have took that place instead of Oklahoma, but we're not going to play revisionist history here. They were coached by Tommy Tuberville, who, I talked about last week how John Gruden is probably is the most overrated head coach in NFL history. Tommy Tuberville is up there for college coaches, just so you know. But just because, I don't know, I feel like he gets so much publicity and for what? He had one really great season at Auburn, had a good tenure at Auburn, but he was very mediocre in his first time at Ole Miss. And then he was a disaster at Cincinnati and didn't do so hot at Texas Tech. A disaster with the Bearcats. But, it is what it is, but, and especially since, all these claim national titles, most of the time when they're telling this to recruits, they're not going to know. It's only the know-it-alls and the people who study the game who actually care, like people like me, but I don't know. I just think it's so why are we doing this? Especially since if you made the argument for I don't know, 2010, even though there really wasn't anyone there, you say, TCU claiming a national title in 2010 because, they did very well, but Auburn literally won the national championship that year. So, it seems very silly to me. But nonetheless, let's look at this 2025 Auburn team, and they're set at 7.5. You look at the schedule this year. It's going to be at Baylor, Ball State, South Alabama, at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, Georgia, Missouri, at Arkansas, Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, Mercer, and Alabama. I'm taking the under. I think this is going to be a disaster year for Auburn, and I think Hugh Freeze is going to get fired. I know, not very optimistic for you Tiger fans, but I just think it's going to be a disaster. I don't know what's going on there. They have a bunch of different play callers. They don't even know. They talked about possibly starting 3 quarterbacks. It's not going to be a great year at Auburn. So down on the Auburn Tigers. The Missouri Tigers, another Tiger here in the SEC. Eli Drinkwitz, I like what he's done as a head coach. He's been kind of under the radar compared to other coaches. Let's take a look at the schedule. Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, South Carolina, UMass, at Alabama, at Auburn, at Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, at Oklahoma, and at Arkansas. And I think what really stands out to me is they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games starting at home. They start half of their schedule at home. So that's really going to be the test here is, can they take advantage of that? If they do, that's going to be super key, but that's also going to be tougher for them when they go on the road, especially in their last 2 games. But I think I'm going to have to take the over just because they have so many of these games at home, and it's their tougher games for the most part. Well, I can't really say that. They got some tough, I don't know. I feel like Missouri has a pretty manageable schedule, and they've done really well in the past, so I can't really say otherwise. So I am going to take the over. On the Missouri Tigers. Next up, the South Carolina Gamecocks, who are really close to making the college football playoff, and Shane Beamer entering his 5th season. The schedules consist of Virginia Tech, South Carolina State, Vanderbilt, at Missouri, Kentucky, at LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, Coastal Carolina, and Clemson. And I like this South Carolina team. A lot of people saying Lenore Sellers, he's the next Cam Newton. Pump the brakes. I do think he's really good. I think he can be a potential Heisman Trophy candidate, but pump the brakes on he's the next Cam Newton. Now, Cam Newton won the Heisman and had probably the single most dominant season in college football history. So I would pump the brakes a little bit there. But is he a successful quarterback? Sure he is, absolutely. And I'm going to take the over on this team. I think 8-4 is more likely than 7-5, although they do have some tricky games here and there, and I don't think you're beating Clemson this year. That's just my opinion, but I still think this can be a talented team for South Carolina. Also, Shane Beamer's not leaving for Virginia Tech, even if that job gets open. Just saying. Putting that on the record. Texas A&M is next. Mike Elko is going into his second season. The schedule consists of UTSA, Utah State at Notre Dame, Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, at Arkansas, at LSU, at Missouri, South Carolina, Samford, and at Texas. And kind of my opinion of this, I think A&M's a pretty decent team. I like Reed at the quarterback position. I think he's definitely the better quarterback. So I'm interested to see how he's going to do in this for this entire season. But I just think it is a competitive SEC, and I think I'm gonna take the under. I think 7-5. They have a tough game against Notre Dame, and then Florida, LSU, Missouri, South Carolina, and at Texas to finish the year. It's gonna be tough, and I'm going different. I'm going something a little bit different here, but that's how I think about Texas A&M. So next up, the Florida Gators. Their win total is set at 6.5. Two teams here sitting at 6.5 right now, but Florida, under head coach Billy Napier, this is a high floor, pretty low ceiling team, I think. And I think it has all to do with injuries. Is this team injury prone? It feels like there's injuries left and right on this team, but they have the talent to possibly compete for a national title. Let's look at the schedule. LIU, South Florida, at LSU, at Miami, Texas, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Georgia, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Florida State. I'm taking the over. I think 6.5 is pretty low. I would like it better at 7.5, but you have like a plethora of teams that are set at 7.5, so I understand it. But it's going to consist on, is DJ Lagway going to be healthy for the entire season? I doubt it. I honestly doubt it. I feel like there's going to be a game where he's injured and he's not going to play a lot in, and they're going to have to go to the backup, and it's going to cost them. Now, what that game is, I don't know. But there's some definitive losses on this schedule. I think they're going to lose to Texas, and they're going to lose to either Georgia and Miami or at LSU. I just think those are losses right then and there. But everyone else is a winnable game. So, yeah, that's what I think on the Florida Gators. Next up, the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, is Venables on the hot seat? Is he on the hot seat? I don't know. How's Mateer going to do, especially what I talked about last season with the gambling? I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. It doesn't really seem like it's kind of seemed like that's brought up, and I don't really think it's going to be talked about a lot besides the broadcasters mention it here and there. But look at the schedule. Illinois State, Michigan, at Temple, Auburn, Kent State, Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, and LSU. And I'm taking the under. Although I do think Oklahoma's going to upset some teams. I think 6-6 is most likely just because they have a lot of easy gimme games in there, but they have some tough games. The Michigan game is going to be tough. Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, and LSU. That's a brutal end to your schedule. It's going to be really tough. I'm going to take the under there. So now we're going into the lower half of the SEC. You got the Arkansas Razorbacks. They are set at 5.5 wins, and I'm not too hot on this Arkansas team. I think Sam Pittman is another coach who's on the hot seat, and they got to win some games early on, and it's going to be pretty tough. You got Alabama A&M, Arkansas State, at Ole Miss, at Memphis, Notre Dame, at Tennessee, Texas A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State, at LSU, at Texas, and Missouri. That's going to be, I'm surprised that they're playing at Memphis. That's kind of surprising to me, but I'm taking the under. I think 5 and 7 is more likely, and it's going to be hard for them to get an SEC win, especially since they play Mississippi State late in the season. That's not a gimme win, and I think they're going to be expecting them to win some SEC games in there, and the games before that are, as I mentioned, Tennessee and Texas A&M and Auburn. I think they can win the Auburn game, but it's not a gimme. Yeah, it's going to be a tough draw for Arkansas. Although I do like Green as the quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback. I like him a lot, but it's just going to be tough. So you got the Kentucky Wildcats. They're up next. They're set at 4.5. And this is going to be a defining season for Mark Stoops. I think he's another coach that's potentially on the hot seat. You got Toledo, Ole Miss, Eastern Michigan, at South Carolina, at Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, at Auburn, Florida, Tennessee Tech, at Vanderbilt, and at Louisville. Completely, so it was 4.5. I think, so you'll probably win the Toledo game, Eastern Michigan, that's 2 games right off the bat, and Tennessee Tech, but I'm taking the under. Maybe it's the Louisville and me, and I don't know. Maybe they're just a little bit too friendly over there, if you get what I'm going. But yeah, taking the under. Taking the under on the Wildcats. Sorry. All right, next up, I got Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, I like Clark Lee, but it seems like they're so fixated, especially on that Netflix documentary, on trying to beat Tennessee, that they don't really think about the rest of the schedule. I don't know. Just a quick side note there. So start off, Charleston Southern at Virginia Tech, at South Carolina, Georgia State, Utah State, at Alabama, LSU, Missouri, at Texas, Auburn, Kentucky, and at Tennessee. I'm also taking the under. I think Vanderbilt's going to be in a world of hurt. They'll win at Charleston Southern, but at Virginia Tech on the road could be a tough one. And I just, I don't know. This bottom of the SEC is pretty brutal. And then you got Mississippi State Bulldogs to finish it off. So look at the schedule: at Southern Miss, Arizona State, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois, Tennessee, at Texas A&M, at Florida, Texas, at Arkansas, Georgia, at Missouri, and Ole Miss. Sorry, Bulldogs, but I'm taking the under. I think 3-9 is more likely than 4-8. Although I would say give Jeff Lebby another year. Maybe that's just optimism, but I just think Mississippi State's just one of the toughest jobs in the SEC, and it's just hard, especially when you went from air raid to pro style to veer and shoot. That's a lot of change in just a couple of years. But so I know that was really quick, but that was what I got on the SEC win totals. So we finally finished all of the win totals in that time. All right, so now previewing the game this weekend, the game in Dublin, Ireland. The Kansas State Wildcats taking on the Iowa State Cyclones. Excuse me for just 1 second. Just pulling up the other games that are happening right there that weekend. But yeah, so I think this game is going to be pretty telling on who's going to take control in the Big 12. I think if Kansas State loses that game, they're probably not going to do as well as I thought they were going to do. Same for Iowa State, but someone's got to lose, and it's going to be kind of impactful, kind of similar to what Georgia Tech and Florida State. Now, I don't think the loser of that game is just going to fall off the face of the earth, but it's going to be a pretty impactful game towards that season. I think if Kansas State wins that, I think they have a good shot to possibly make the college football playoff as the Big 12 representative. So that's what I like on the Wildcats. I also like Kleiman. I like Campbell too, but I feel like he gets overrated at times. But look at the other games that are going on. So you got Idaho State at UNLV. I like UNLV. I really like Dan Mullen. I think he's a offensive mastermind, and I feel like he shouldn't have been fired at Florida. I feel like they should have just fired the DC, Todd Grantham, and had another year to see how it is. But nonetheless, they moved in that direction. And Dan Mullen, I think he's going to thrive at UNLV. I think UNLV is probably going to win the Mountain West. You heard it here first, not Boise State. But Fresno State, Kansas, I mean, I don't really got much on that game. Probably the game that I'm really not going to tune into at all. You got Sam Houston at Western Kentucky. Another game not really super invested in, but it's a good group of 5 matchup to get your season started. And then Stanford at Hawaii. Hawaii putting some commitments into their stadium. Going to be in the rotation for the college football playoff. That's pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. Hawaii getting approved for their new stadium, and Stanford going to the island. I think that's going to be pretty interesting. But both these teams are going to struggle this year, so it's going to be a dogfight to say the least. But yeah, that's week 0 here in the world of college football. Now we'll kind of talk about, so what conference? So when you think of a conference, what are some songs that you kind of tie to that? You know, I feel like a lot of people in the SEC, I know this is basic, but I think Southern Nights, I think that's a perfect song that just kind of resembles the SEC, not that Delta Dawn song that they play like on every TikTok of the SEC. I'm sick of that song. I'm not representing that with that conference. Next up, the Big Ten. I'm kind of thinking like, I don't really know. I mean, Jump Around is just kind of an easy one, but that's kind of more Wisconsin, but everyone loves Jump Around. It's just a great song. You can maybe do, I don't know. I'm really struggling for some Midwestern songs that you could add in there. Big 12, I'm thinking Welcome to the Show. Just a country song that just kind of sets the mood. And then the ACC, I'm going with Joker and the Thief. Of course, I know that's a Louisville song, but they played at other ACC stadiums too. They played it at Clemson when Louisville whooped them. I think it's a pretty good song to represent the ACC. But yeah, I know that was a lot. That was rapid fire, but I'm just excited. It shows my enthusiasm for the sport. I'm happy to be in season. Season 1 of me covering college football. Let's get rocking and rolling. But that's going to do it for today's episode of the Tyler Bright and Early podcast, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football centered. And of course, you can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on X, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. You can listen to us on Spotify, or you can watch us on YouTube. Deuce.